Hi everybody, let's put some night sights on an FNP 9, and as an homage to Patriot in the Dark, I'm going to be adding extra descriptive elements for the visually impaired. Hi everybody, Cycle Camp here, and today we're going to be upgrading my bedside gun with a set of Tritium sights. I decided that since the odds are if it's a bedside gun, it's probably going to get used at night. It's probably going to be pretty dark. And there's just no way, even with the flashlight, that it would be probable that I'll be able to pick the sights up unless they're doing something other than just sitting there. So basically, it was my birthday earlier in this month, and I got this set of TruGlow Tritium Pros for my birthday. They are supposed to fit the FNS, the FNX, and the FNP. The FNP is the one that we're interested in. These should go on fairly painlessly because the FNP does not have adjustable rear sights, and it is uses a dovetail system. So first let's get the gun out here. This is my FNP 9. As you can see, I have a light on it. The FNP has a short rail in the front. I've got the gun oriented with the slide away from me and the hand grip pointing towards me, and the gun is pointed off to my left for those of you that are visually impaired. So before we get started, what's the first thing we're going to do? Well, we're going to make sure the gun is safe. So we'll press the magazine release, which is located right at the base of the right at the base of the trigger guard. And you'll notice that this is loaded up, and that's because it is my regular gun. Then I'm going to pick the gun up, rack it sharply to the back. You probably heard the round falling out, and that is all there. And now the FNP 9 is a single action firearm, and it does have an exposed hammer in the rear. So you can cock it if you want, and it does not have a safety. I do not like safeties on guns you're going to have to pick up and use at a moment's notice. What it does have is a decocker. So if you cock the hammer, as I've just done, and you pull down on the decocker, you can hear the gun decock, and it decocks it in a safe way. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to remove the light. Now, the way this light goes on is very simple. There are two studs on either side of the light, and you pull down on them, and then you slide the light off. So there we have slid the light off. This is a fairly inexpensive light that I got actually at Tulsa a while back, and basically the first time you click it, you get a solid light, and the second time you turn it on, you get the strobe. So it does both. So basically, I usually set it so it's going to come on as a solid light. So I'll turn it off and leave it set for a solid light. And for the short distances in my house, an inexpensive light is more than enough. Okay. Now, it's relatively difficult to work on sights if the slide is attached to the top of the gun. So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the slide from the gun. If you were to run your finger over the front of the gun where the slide is, and you can tell the difference between the slide and the receiver, because the slide is cold to the touch and the receiver is made out of plastic. You know, it's a polymer receiver. If you slide back, you'll feel a semicircular notch, and if you continue back on the plastic, you'll find a switch, and that switch is going to pull down with the gun in the same orientation with the muzzle pointed to the left. That gun pulls down clockwise from the rightmost edge. So basically what you're going to do is slide the magazine back, lock the magazine with the magazine release. Lock the slide with the slide release. I didn't mean the magazine. Slide with the slide release. And that positions that semicircular cut right over that release button. Then you pull that release button straight down so it's perpendicular to the frame, and now you should be able to release the slide lock and just slide right off the top of the gun. Okay, So now we have the slide off the top of the gun. I put the other part of the gun away. We're going to turn it over so that the top of the slide is on the table, and we're going to remove the mainspring and the rod. Now this is a captured rod, a captured spring. It's all one assembly. It's not separate like on a lot of guns. So this is all one piece, and there's a big flat round piece on one side and a little plastic pin on the other. Make sure you remember the orientation of that, because it's the plastic pin that has to go in the front so it slides through. Okay, then we're going to reach down. We're going to grab where the barrel toggles, bring it slightly forward, lift it up, and take it out. And the other reason I'm doing this is I want to make sure that there's nothing else holding that front side end. So now I can look inside the slide, and I can see that there are no screws or you know, pins or any of that kind of stuff inside. All right? Okay. So the easiest way to remove one of these things is to use a sight pusher or puller, depending on how you like to do it. And let me get my sight puller out. So I actually keep my sight puller in my range bag in case I have to do a tune-up on the range. So I keep it wound up in this piece of cloth. This particular sight puller it's a fairly inexpensive one, but it gets the job done, and that's all that counts. So basically, a sight puller is basically a clamp that helps hold on to the slide, and then there's a rack and pinion system on the top where as you turn a screw, a steel piece that's threaded slides across the top, and there's a finger that hangs down inside here. There's a finger that hangs down, and that finger is what actually grabs the sight. Okay, and the clamp part has a couple of felt pads on it to keep you from marring up your slide. So first thing you do is you take the lower screw, which just has a thumb. It's a bolt with a little thumb thing pressed into it. So you don't need anything for that. You can do that with a finger. And then you set your slide in. Now this particular slide, because it's sort of 1911-ish, actually there's actually, if you feel around the front of the barrel, around the front of the slide, you'll find that there's an oval piece, and that's where the guide rod sits in. So you got to get that through and then back up. So this may not work real well for this particular gun. I don't know. So, but we'll see. So now I'm going to clamp the sight into the pusher. It looks like it'll work if I leave it at a slight angle. Now, one thing that's happened here is the slide is too it's not tall enough to come really well into the where the pusher's going to reach it, where that finger on that top pusher's going to reach it. So they do also give you a small piece of metal that you can use as a shim. So, and I can't get it in there I can't put it in first and then add the slide. So I'll have to put the slide in first and then add the shim to the bottom. There we go. And now we're where we want to be. We're pretty close to it anyway. Okay. Now what happens on the top here is there's a bolt. Again, there's a bolt kind of thing on there that allows you to take that, allows you to move that pusher element on this rack and pinion system. Allows you to move that rack and that element over. But before I do that, I'm going to mark the center of the current sight, because this gun is not dead centered. So I'm going to take a pencil and just very lightly mark where the center of that sight is, and then I'm going to do the same thing in the rear. I'm going to mark the center of the U-notch in the rear, so that when I push these other ones back on, I'll at least be close. Okay. Now I have a wrench. This is a 9/16. The bolt, the through bolt that does that is a 9/16 bolt. And basically what you have is you have a bolt with a nylock nut on the other side, and the nylock nut is put on to hold the bolt from moving, but not so that it stops it holds the bolt from moving out side to side, but but it allows it to turn. Okay, so I can just barely see that it's just going to catch the edge of that. The little pusher part here on the bottom of the pusher that's going across, that's the pinion part, is now just hooked on the bottom of the sight. And the other important thing with this, when you're using a sight pusher, don't ever push on the top part, the flagged up part of the sight, because you'll snap it off. You need to push on the base. So fart around with it as much as you have to, but get it on the base. So now I'm going to take the wrench and I am going to operate the bolt and use the pusher to move that off. And it feels like it's moving good. So I'm using the open-ended end of the wrench, and I'm only going a half a turn at a time, because that way I can hold the part on the table, and it makes it easier for me to do the work. So I've got it about halfway off. 1, 2, 3, 4. It should start loosening up here pretty soon, because it's only being held on with half the slide. So 3, 4, and there's the front sight is off. So now I'm gonna relax. I'm gonna move the pusher in the opposite direction to get it clear of the slot, because I won't be able to remove the barrel until I get clear of the slot with the little piece that hangs down, the dovetail that's in the slide. So we're gonna get that out of there. As I said, this is a fairly inexpensive pusher. It's just a chunk of metal that's been wrapped in a square, to look like a square frame. And then okay, here's our front sight out. And I mean, they're nice sights. You know, they have beautiful white dots. They're very, very nice sights. But you can't see them at night. You can pick them up like crazy during the daytime. They're just fabulous. But you cannot pick them up at night. Okay, so I removed the barrel from the pusher, and the spacer fell out. That's the noise that you heard was the spacer falling out. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing on the rear. Now the rear is a little easier, because the rear of the slide is perfectly flat. There's no protrusion, so that should be a little easier to line up. Yep, that looks good. Okay, so I still have to move the. I still need to move the pusher element further back, because I've got to get it all the way out from where it's going to line up. I've got to get it out from where we're going to actually set the slide back in there. I am still going to need the spacer to make sure I'm down on the base of the sight. So now what I'm doing now is clamping up the slide itself. So now the slide's all clamped up. Now I'm going to advance the pusher, and I'm kind of on the forward edge. I'm going to adjust this a little more to try to get that thing as close to the center as I can. So I'm putting all the pressure I can on the sight, not twisting it or causing it to deviate or any of that. Okay, and now I've got it lined up again. I think I'm ready to go, and I'm going to take our wrench. And you'll notice I have a fairly long-handled wrench here. These things, you know, sometimes it can take a little bit of pressure to get these off. And if you have a really stubborn one, what you do is you get the pressure on it, and then you can tap it. If you can reach in there, you can tap it with a punch just to get it started. Sometimes they get a little sticky. Now, I've noticed that the slide, this is going to be a hard one because these are a lot bigger. I've noticed the slide is starting to rock up, so I didn't have it clamped in very well. So I'm going to loosen this up again. Loosen the top pusher, and then I'm going to loosen the clamp. And that is one of the disadvantages to using a pusher, is it is pretty easy for you to loosen the clamp. I'm sorry, to have the slide rock up in the clamp. And really the only way to solve that is to make it better is to go down, to put spacers in to get the slide up as high as you can, so that you're down as low as possible on the sight itself without actually dragging on the frame. But unfortunately, mine only has the one piece, and I don't have a metal shop handy, so I don't have pieces of metal hanging around. So I'm going to try it again. I've got it reclamped. But I do use a slightly long-handled wrench because this can be kind of tough. Now, I've got a crap load of pressure on that, but it is not really moving very much. And of course these sights have never been removed as long as I've owned this firearm, so I'm not real surprised. But it is not moving. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take it out of the, I'm going to loosen this back up and take it out, and I'm going to try coming at it from the other direction, just to be on the safe side. You never know, it might be, sometimes these dovetails are cut so that you should come in and out from one side versus the other. So I'm going to take the slide and put it in from the other direction. Again, centering it up so it's going to hit the, making sure it's flat against the base of the pusher, and trying to make sure that it's going to center up where the little pusher element is going to hit it as close to the center as it can. Again, the rear sight, you know, the front sights are kind of small and the rear sights are kind of big. You know, they have a lot more surface area to them. And we'll try this again and see if we can get it to come up. Nope, doesn't want to move. No, that's not good. And I can see, because of the mark that I put on it, I can see that it is not, doesn't appear to have moved at all. I'm going to spare you all the struggling here. Basically, I determined that the thing was not going to move at all, and so I ended up taking it out and starting it with a punch, and that basically, you know, that's where we'll pick it up, where we've started it with the punch. Yeah, that looked like it moved. So again, I don't want to beat it up real bad. So I'm going to go back to the sight pusher and try it again. Okay. It did move. Move when we hit it with the punch. It doesn't really look like it wants to move much with the pusher. And it does look like I do have it incorrectly as far as the height of the sight. Right where the pusher wants to be, right where that little pusher element wants to be. I may end up having to drive it off with the. Ouch. I may end up having to drive it off with the punch. It is definitely moving. Not moving much. So again, we'll fast forward this a little bit while I'm beating up on this thing. Eventually we gave up and we had to put it in the put it on the block and hit it with a hammer, and we'll pick it up again when more interesting stuff happens during the course of that activity. Now there is a hole becoming exposed under there, but there's no screw in the actual sight itself, so I'm not too worried about that. And there's the most of the way off, not quite all the way off, but most of the way off, so we're getting there. Just to give you a feel for the progress we're making, we are getting there, a little at a time. I'm kind of beating up this side a little bit, and there she popped out. This appears to be metallic, so that sucker was really in there. So anyway, so here's the rear sight. Here's an example of the, you know, you can see that's a nice, beautiful 3-dot white picture. It's got a square bottom on the rear sight, which is kind of cool. The new one uses a U, which I think will be a little easier to deal with on the other guy. Now there is a, okay, boy, I'm really glad that didn't pop out. So basically what we have here is there's a spring. You see this channel on the top of the slide on the rearmost portion of the slide. So we still have the slide oriented in the same way. The muzzle end of the slide is to my left. If you come all the way to the rear where we took out the rear sight, you'll see that in addition to the dovetail, there's a channel and there's a spring. Well, that spring is the spring for the firing pin safety. If we turn it over and we see that round piece of metal hanging down, that's the firing pin safety. So I'm really glad that when we took that off, that thing didn't go shooting across the room. And in fact, you can take this whole assembly out. You can see the firing pin safety. So here's the firing pin safety and its spring. So that probably explains why we were having such a hard time getting this thing off with the pusher, because we were fighting the drag of that spring as well. But we're just the lucky people. Otherwise, we would have had a quick timeout while I crawled around under the desk and tried to figure out what was going on. And that also tells me we're going to be putting the rear sight back on first. Okay, so here's like I said, here's the TruGlow sights. It was not that easy finding a set of sights that would fit an FNP 9. So pretty cool. And thank you to my daughter who bought me those. Now here are the TruGlow sights. Obviously they look pretty much the same as what we're looking at. The front sight is really big, and it has a white circle with the tritium insert in the center. And then the rear sights really are just the 2 tritium inserts. There's no big circle there. Okay. And doesn't look that great now, but in the dark, these things, if I was at, maybe I'll turn the lights off later on and we'll take a look at that. All right, so I'm going to put the other thing these sights have is they have that aggressive notch cut in them. So if you orient the sight as it's going to go on the firearm. Okay. We're talking about the rear sight here. It's going on the firearm, and you look at it, you'll see it's cut at the front of the sight that doesn't have the dots. The front of the sight that's closest to the muzzle has an angled cut, and that's one of those so you can rack it, you know, against a piece of furniture or, you know, whatever else you got to do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to depress the spring. Try to depress the spring anyway. We're going to depress the spring with a punch. Wait a minute, did I lose that? Nope, I didn't. Okay. All right, we're going to depress the spring with the punch. With a punch. Actually, I'm going to use the tip of a pencil because I want to be able to get all the way over onto the side of it. And then we're going to start the new what do you call it over? The new sight. Make sure it's oriented right. Yeah, okay, got the dots in the back. And like I said before, I am going to put a dot of gun oil. Take that back off. Come on, get off of there. I'm going to put some gun oil in here to hopefully have this slide a little easier. I'm actually not using gun oil, I'm using ballistol because I love the way it stinks. Okay, in fact I'll keep it out of here, I may need it for front. Okay, so again I've got the slide on the block. The slide is oriented as it would be on the gun, with the bottom of the slide pointing towards the table and with the sights up. I'm going to reach through to the opposite side of the cutout with the circle with the spring, and I'm going to reach through there with a pencil and depress the spring while I start the sight. And that's all she wrote there. Now I'm going to try to use the pusher to push the sight back on. I don't know if this is going to work, but it would be nice. So first I have to get the pusher element back. And the disadvantage of these, I'll tell you, one of the disadvantages of these pushers is the metal. They don't use hardened steel rods, and if you crank on them too hard, you can booger up the threads, and then it makes them really hard to move after that. And I really put some oomph on that the last time, so I couldn't get it to come off. So basically we're going to spend the next interlude cranking and you know, playing around and resetting stuff and all that until we get the sight put on all the way. So we'll fast forward through a lot of that stuff until we're just about done. I'm just checking the position now to see how close we are to the mark, and we've only got about, geez, a couple of millimeters to go. I use millimeters because it's a Belgian gun, you know, so I assume it prefers if I talk it to it in its native language. A little bit more. My sights were offset slightly to the left, so this will end up being offset slightly to the left as well. I think I went too far, but just take it apart. Now I'm relaxing the pusher, and then I'm going to open up the jaw clamp and get the guys out of here. So we got, you can see we're pretty close. I don't know if you can see the pencil mark or not, but we're pretty close to the pencil mark. I think I went by it just a little bit, but we'll see. And you can see that the sight is offset just a tad. Even going by it, the sight is offset just a tad. Good. Okay. Well, that was fairly painless, other than screwing around with the pusher. So now let's go to the front. We'll get the front sight. Put a little bit of oil in there, make that a little easier. Again, you make sure that the front sight has a rounded edge on the front, and the square edge is where the tritium insert is in the back. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put it on the firearm, on the slide, and let me just give it a quick tap to start it. And now we will get the pusher to push it in for us. So we're going to see a lot of struggling here, and basically we've got an issue with the way the slide fits into the pusher device. I'm going to skip through a lot of the attempts I made to try to make it work, and we'll skip through where I describe through to where I describe what the actual problem is. Okay, so I'll spare you the hammering part again. We'll just skip right through that until we get to just about the end of the pounding on it, and we'll pick it up when we're done pounding. DECOCKER. It's a DECOCKER.